What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into Bioly Studios. Without further ado, let's paint these awesome volcano coupling pair from the Disney Pixar I Lava You 3D clay textured light switch. Yes, it's a lot to this project and it's turned out absolutely beyond my expectations up to this point. Now just remember that I've separated these out into individual videos with their own individual content, kind of commentary of me in the background, just talking about some of the color combinations we're using as we paint different sections. I've separated them off into sky, volcanic ash, the actual volcanoes themselves, the beach, the water and waves, as well as the wells, and then the last section of this will be the actual painting of the beautiful turtles on the beach, which is a little coupling pair of turtles. But as you can see, we do have a Mars black base built up on our two beautiful volcanoes here, and they turned out very cool, very nice and light, and I'm very happy with how the overall sculpture turned out. You can see I already have the ports for the actual light switches cut out there, and I did make it its own individual Dremel kind of cutting tool video in that playlist, so you'll be able to check that out. It's the first time I've used Dremels to cut into some clay in a while, and it's just very cool to pull out that tool. Anytime I can have an opportunity to pull out extra tools to use on a project, I like to do so, because I'm a dude. I like my tools. What can I say? So as you can see, we've already built up a beautiful kind of like a little bit of a burnt umber base on the Mars black, and we're just going to go ahead and start building up some of these browns before we can start rolling into any greens whatsoever. Now the hardest part of this process is just getting the overall kind of color combination right for the faces of the two volcanoes. Now a lot of this is detail work, just kind of making sure that I don't get any over paint on the blue sky background, and making sure that I get the right color combination in the particular areas. And we don't really do any of the massive detail shading until the very last few literal minutes of this video. So just be aware that this is a little bit of a slow process, and it's just building layers here and there, letting it dry, and then we're mostly doing a wet on wet effect here. But we're also dry brushing. So although I am mixing a little bit on these raised edges that we left behind when we sculpted this, we want to make sure that we're able to build up these layers, and it just intensifies the overall color combination. The goal here is that we originally made the interior of all of these little slices with our clay tools, and then those will kind of show through more of the bright layers as we dry brush those on, and it really just intensifies the overall depth of the two volcanoes throughout the process. It'll make sense here in a little while as we kind of reach the halfway point and you really start to see more of the colors build up into a green color. But just be aware that it's all about layers, and we have to build up those layers even through the ugly stages before we can get into the fun, beautiful detail stages. I still have yet to decide if I'm going to actually paint the waterfall that's kind of cascading down between them. I may do so, I may not. I don't know yet. I may just leave that out just because I feel like it kind of draws the eye a little bit too much. And I want my whale and the two coupling turtles to kind of draw the eye a little bit. So I may leave the little waterfall out. We'll kind of see how it feels at the very end when I've got everything said and done. So in the very final format, in the very last glamour shots of the full-length content video for the painting version of this project, you may see the little waterfall effect up here between the two volcanoes. But you are not going to see that in this actual video. Building up some more of the greens on the female volcano there. Now just remember that the right hand side of her dress or body would be more of a brown color, and we'll bring that back in later on in the process. But right now I'm just trying to get some color on there, build up some of those colors over that existing white bleached out clay base before we can get into some of the funner layers. You'll see I also will continuously come back and I will give the face quite a few layers here, and it's more so just because I'm putting them on very thin in a dry brush manner, and I'm trying to build up those layers without kind of really just I wouldn't say I'm trying to cover up anything, but I'm really not finding the color combination that I like for the faces. The male face is turning out substantially more further along than the females, because for some reason every time I put it on her face is obviously a lot smoother than his, which means that I need to have the color combination substantially closer to what it's supposed to be. In the long run, I actually introduce a little bit of crimson into my kind of skin tone or bright rock tone, and I start to put in more highlights where the sun is coming in from the left-hand side, and I put a little bit of shade on her face. It kind of brings it all together. But right now, some of that clay is still popping through her face, and some of that Mars black is showing through. And it takes a few layers on her face to really cover it up. You can kind of see I'm really also kind of just building up layers on the rock formations, or the crests and hills around where his beard would be. Now, I needed to do the brown base first before I go in with these green highlights over those ridges, because the green depths and valleys on his body needed to be browned out to a dark, like almost kind of a raw umber base. Now, I'm also going to introduce a little bit of inks here. Usually I'll just use inks kind of just as a way to accent some of those sculpted textures that I put in, and I am doing that in this situation as well. So I'm using that on the foreheads, a lot around his face, because his face is so much more detailed and rougher than hers is. Hers is supposed to be a lot more finesse and kind of just smoothed out and more feminine. But as you can see, I'm really just bringing that into all of those recesses and crags so that they're a lot darker before I add some brighter highlights here. I had to include a little bit of inks along the way just because I love how free-flowing they are. And it's one of my favorite ways to kind of wash out some of the overall features when I do sculptures like this. So you'll very often see me come back and give it some acrylic ink washes just to bring up the overall texture. It really does intensify the overall finish of the rock formations as we work through the details. Now I'm starting to introduce a little bit of cadmium yellow hue, and we're going to start to work with some sap green here. Now as we mix this out, it's going to make a lot more of a bright green here, and I also throughout the process feel like it's lacking something. So later on in the process, I will start to introduce a little bit of titanium white and a little bit also of a burnt umber. The burnt umber completely changes it and makes it feel like more of a muddy, like mossy feel, and that's really what I was looking for before I went up to these bright green highlights that I have here. So I may have mixed the cadmium yellow hue and the sap green just a little bit too early, and I needed to introduce a little bit more brown into that, make it a little bit more muddy for this first layer. It turns out fine in the long run, but I just felt like I was missing that burnt umber, and I realized that later on in the process. You'll start to see that the overall highlights of green are really starting to intensify here, and I'm really starting to think about where the light would be cascading onto the volcanoes from the left-hand side. Some of this would be visible, and some of this will be in recessed shadow more so than others. You'll also notice around his face where the beard is going from rock into vegetation. I will come back and start to detail that between rock formation of the brown as well as the vegetation of the green. So I'll kind of like go back and forth so I can kind of get a nice beautiful ombre, like kind of layered effect, and it would just intensify the overall details on his face there. I do believe that I also did not make her face or neck as long as I should have. I think her chin needed to come up just slightly, and her neck needed to be slightly longer. Well, when I sculpted it, it makes it look like she's like tucked in towards him and looking at him, and I'm completely okay with that. If it's like small, minute details from any kind of original reference photos when I sculpted it, then it is what it is. It's just how I decided to sculpt it when I made it. Adding some of those beautiful highlights there. Now this is more of a titanium white, a little bit of yellow, cadmium yellow hue, as well as some Naples yellow, beautiful Naples yellow. I love Naples yellow as a substitute to titanium white very often, and that's actually what I'm using on her face now is the Naples yellow. It's a beautiful skin tone, and any kind of time I can use it instead of a titanium white, I will. Don't get me wrong, you see there on my palette there I have titanium white as well, but I'm just using it sparingly just to kind of increase the overall opaqueness of that paint as I apply that. And I'm using also burnt umber to kind of refine the overall recesses and shadows on her face. Her face was probably the most challenging portion of this entire project, and I was just trying to get the overall shade and the kind of like the shadows and the highlights correct, so that way I just felt like it was justified in the way that I painted it. Eventually I decided to say, I need some crimson in there, and it really warms up the overall brown. So I realized that way late in the process that I needed a little bit of crimson in there, and here is me adding in a little bit in that crimson, and it warms everything up quite a bit. Now, I'm not worrying about her hair at this point in time because I'm going to go over her hair with a pure ivory black. And the very last portion of the overall painting of the entire item is I will give her hair just a very light, kind of like a gray dry brush effect, and it will just accent all of those beautiful sculpted cuts that I made in her long flowing hair. So I don't know if it's supposed to be like just flows of hair, but it's actually supposed to be volcanic dried lava as it comes down the outside of her body, but it's supposed to simulate her hair. It's pretty cool overall design, but we're going to go ahead and start off with an ivory black in just a moment. You can see that I really did brighten his face up a little bit. I'm just brightening here and there along these raised kind of rock formations where that rock is visible. Just remember, when we apply epoxy, a lot of times it kind of darkens a lot of these items out. So I'm not going with a pure titanium white, but I am building up layers of rock formation, so that way I can just kind of get the overall look, and it's not just all green or just all rock formation. I need to have a wide variety of colors, and those highlights really need to speak to you when you look at this item to create the depth that we need. All of those darks around his beard and around her hairline and around her right hand side is really going to look good. And then I'm going to brighten his body on the left hand side just a little bit with a kind of a muddy brown green mixture here. Her right hand side of the body is supposed to be a lot more rocky, and I think that's just supposed to be so it kind of draws the eye up towards her and not just really over to the right hand side. So I went ahead and applied a brown layer to that, and we're going to come in here and just kind of give it some details with the same muddy brown and green color there. Increase the overall highlights around that one spot right there where the lush green grass or vegetation is coming down her body, and it just really intensifies her color quite a bit. I did not want it to look too cartoony when I did the greens, and I even spoke to my wife about how I just didn't want the green to look too bright to where it looked out of place and it looked just very generic and cartoony. If I can meet the between line between cartoony and a little bit of slight realism in my style of sculpting and painting, then I'll be completely happy with how it turns out. But if it's not in my style, then I just always feel like it's forced, and it's just not going to work out in my mind's eye, and then I just kind of get frustrated with the overall process. So everything that I paint, although I'm using some stuff as reference photos, it's in my style, and I am using references, don't get me wrong, to kind of get my color combinations right in some ways. But once I kind of get the idea how I want to do the colors and their overall shapes and designs, I'm just running with it. I kind of put the reference photo off to the side. I don't touch it again. I don't look at it again, and I just run with it. And whatever I turn out to be for that particular section of the body is what I make. And this portion, we're just going to go ahead and give her hair a ivory black covering here before we do the dry brushing later on in the process. What do you think, you guys? That is the female and male volcanoes from I Lava You, the Disney Pixar short. They're on Disney Plus. You can always view that. It's very, very, very fun. This is again going to be a light switch for my kids' bathroom. It's a beach themed, and I hope they enjoy it. I will catch you guys on this playlist or the next video of this series. Later, guys.